Mark's already dated me, right, by saying that he's known me for more than 20 years. So let me sort of start with a little level setting that way. I remember when I was sort of the hip person in outsourcing, right? Look at this. Look at what's happening here. Right? And Mark is right. I have the benefit of having been around in the outsourcing industry sort of when the earth cooled. And it's nice to see, as I look out and see what you're doing here today, how it's evolved over the course of the last 20 years or so. Mark asked me to do two challenging things. One was to come here and talk to you about crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. The second was to limit my remarks to 5 minutes. So the challenging part of that is that, one, I'm Irish, and so generally we can talk about anything for 20 or 30 minutes, mostly ourselves. So I'll spare you that piece. And then secondly, I'm a lawyer, so I've spent the last almost 30 years now, mostly here in New York, getting paid by the word. So. So I'll try to truncate all that and avoid my normal Dickensian approach of having a lot of chapters to this. But Mark and Carl asked me just to talk sort of briefly about how this sort of has all evolved, at least from my perspective, to where we are now. I mean, it seems very clear to me that what is going on now is a logical offshoot and outgrowth of where we started 20 or 30 years ago. In a lot of ways, it's sort of the democratization of capital, capital raising. That's the way it looks to me. Clearly, as the previous speaker just said, there's a need to try to come up with new models, new ways to try to have capital formation. This approach that you all have been exploring, both in the sense of the actual capital formation and the sense of the crowd sort of sourcing piece of it, are all things that we anticipated, I suppose, 30 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 years ago, but that got kind of delayed with the internet crash. I had a front row seat for that, where we thought a lot of the types of things that you're describing now, this sort of matching people to projects, matching capital to projects, would happen a lot faster than it's had. It's actually very rewarding, though, to see that it's happening now. Clearly, with the Jobs Act, with some of the other, sort of legislative approaches that are underway now, this segment of the capital formation process should continue to grow. Clearly, as a lawyer, I can't help but note for you that the more successful you are, the more likely it is that you're going to attract legal and regulatory oversight. I can't do anything about that. It's sort of the price you're going to pay for success. But this model of sort of fragmenting a market, whether it be through capital formation, whether it be through sort of project management, matching people to jobs, that model is a model that is obviously going to at some point sort of start to really dominate the marketplace. I asked one of my other friends who's here, Mark Robinson, I asked him out in the hallway a sort of simple question, which he had a very concise answer to, which is, my question was, how do you make money at this? And I think ultimately that's going to be the challenge for the people in this room, whether you're on the supplier side or whether you're on the corporate side. The corporate side seems a bit more readily discernible to me. I mean, we used to talk about things like outsourcing the R&D functions of major companies. And as I sat here earlier today and listened to some of the things that you were talking about, it sort of how'd that feel to me. So that piece makes a lot of sense to me. And the piece where you're bringing an exchange together, you're matching either capital to projects or capital to ideas, all of that makes a lot of sense to me too. The economics around it make less sense to me, perhaps because I'm just too dated in it at this point. But certainly that piece to me needs to be further explored and further explained. It feels to me a lot like angel financing felt to me, 10, 15 years ago, but it's kind of like micro angel financing, if that's the way it sort of feels to me as well. With that, therefore, comes a couple of dynamics that I just feel compelled to say something about. One is, obviously, what this market is doing is it's sort of also democratizing risk. Because the people who are making investments, the people who are funding, each have different appetites for risk. That appetite for risk is, of course, going to be different than the typical either corporate appetite or even the typical sort of professionalized investor appetite, whether that's private equity or more professionalized angel funds or whatever it is. And with that appetite for risk, and with that sort of continuum of risk that's going to change over the course of the next, let's say, 10, 15 years as this market explodes, what's also going to come with it, of course, is an opportunity for a higher reward. Because if you're getting in at the level of where you would be getting in based on the sort of crowdfunding pieces of it, there's going to be great opportunity for high reward. Having said that, of course, with reward comes risk. And so part of what's going to affect this market is how does this market actually react to the discovery of risk, to when risk becomes not a hypothetical but an actual. That part, I think, is harder to predict and harder to assess how the market's going to react to it, how the regulators are going to react to it. But it is an exciting frontier. And I can tell by looking around the room that I'm getting too old for it. So, my sense is that you have, as I said, sort of democratized capital. In a sense, it feels to me like it's sort of like buying a lottery ticket. My father used to say that lottery tickets were a tax on hope. I urge you to think about that for a minute, not just to dismiss it. Sort of an interesting way to look at it. I'm not sure what the tax here is going to be, other than that risk-reward equation that I just talked about. But clearly that tax is going to be viewed as worth being paid by more and more and more people as more and more of these projects become successful, and as some of these crowdfunded things, crowdfunded opportunities, identities, projects, companies, whatever it's going to be, start to gain the notoriety that some of the other more traditional, older style outsourcing projects had. So I think I've succeeded in doing 5 minutes. Is that correct? There you go. So with that, I will shut my meter off. Thank you very much. And Carl, I turn it over to you.